Hello and welcome to Las Blancas Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Las Blancas. We are back this time discussing the Champions League fixture against Arsenal. It was our first win in the knockouts, and to discuss that, to break it all down, I've not only got Kanita with me here, but we have a special guest with us. Freddie is here to give us some insights about Arsenal and what went wrong, what went right, and how did he find the experience being pitch side as well. So, Freddie, first of all, welcome to the pod for the first time. How you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me. I'm loving the sort of Gooner Fanzine managing Madrid sort of collaboration with obviously you guys and Pridium, who I met a year ago at university. We were on like the same course, and it's so cool now that the men and women's team, Real and Arsenal, are playing each other both in the Champions League quarterfinals. I mean, results dependent. Me and Pridium might, I don't know how it's going to affect our friendship, but the same for you guys. But yeah, it's great that it's all lined up, and it's great to be on. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so obviously, like given that statement, it is not hard to make that Arsenal did not get the result that they wanted. Real Madrid won the first leg 2-0 at home, which is a great advantage for us. But we'll get into all of that. But I think the whole game, bigger than the game, the talking point in this fixture was the pitch. It's been raining nonstop in Madrid, and the pitch looked really bad right from the get go. Right from the warm ups as well, players were slipping all over. There were reports that it's not looking good, and it did not look good when the ball started rolling because it wasn't moving as players expected it to. So I'll come to you, Kanita, first. What were your initial impression when you saw the first visuals of the pitch? And everybody and their mothers have been on it about how this has been an embarrassment to women's football and all. And I'll share my thoughts later. But Kanita, what did you make of it?
Yeah, honestly, when I first saw it, I've never seen the pitch in worse condition. I mean, this pitch is usually pristine, and
Yeah.
but we know that it's been like this, like in Madrid for days on end. I think it's since March started, since we got back from the international break. We also had that El Clasico on the first leg on Di Stefano. It was raining nonstop. It was a puddle, like the pitch was a pool. I know, but it wasn't in this like situation where just mud all over the place. And yeah, it was definitely much worse than 2 weeks ago because this was 2 weeks ago. But when the ball started rolling, I noticed that the players had to actually, calculate a bit how strong the back passes had to be because every single back pass, I even commented this on Twitter, like every single back pass was risky in own half for either team because first of all, like they had to make sure the player that were marking wasn't there, or and that the pass wasn't too weak so it wouldn't get intercepted. And I saw it a lot, like the players really struggled to get those calculations in. And I don't know, I was pissed. I was proper pissed. I was putting up tweets about it, and I was also embarrassed about it as well. Honestly, like there was a lot of discussion on Twitter, obviously, like why wasn't this played on Bernabeu, right? And I was like, I wanted it to be so much, and I really thought that it might have been possible. Like what the draw happened like a month and a half ago, like February 7th, right? And we've known that, and this was the first draw that you could say, okay, this is like a balanced draw. We have a chance. If it was Barcelona again, like sure, I mean I wouldn't open Bernabeu for Barcelona either, for the first time. But it's the second ever knockout stages game, and it was against a team that we from the beginning, the only team we had a chance against. And I don't know, I think this was a perfect game, perfect time to try to market it, try to open it. And there were rumors in the beginning of the season that they might open Bernabeu this season. Like I think, yeah, during the preseason there was there were some talks about looking at the Bernabeu and how to put the women's team there. And this was during the international break and all. So I don't know. Like I'm not too surprised though. The marketing for the women's team isn't really that good in this club, but they don't really do marketing like in Real Madrid because it's Real Madrid. They were like, I don't know, Real Madrid doesn't need the marketing, so why would the women's team need either? So I don't know, but in defense of the pitch, it's never looked this bad. And I know people were like, "Oh my, this is the worst pitch I've ever seen in women's football." That's definitely not true. Like, please watch the Tenerife games in Liga F. Very bad, like artificial pitches all around in Liga F, and I don't know, like even on like the other day in the cup final, right? Um in England, like very bad conditions as well, right? And I don't know, like people are maybe a lot exaggerating, but I think the it's very much there, and I was pissed too. But yeah, I know my club, I know why they didn't do it. I just wish they did. So yeah.
Yeah, Freddie, before coming to you, like Arsenal as a club are probably one of the best clubs that have marketed their women's team and have put them at the forefront consistently. They have had more games at the Emirates, and they have been made this unique sort of USP for the club. Like they are the main selling points at times, and they are put at the as the face of the club as well. So I know, like when you went there, when you saw the pitch, the immediate reaction would have been, why isn't this being followed here? But what were your general inference or whatever when you saw the pitch, when you saw the game happen there, when you saw that injury to Leupolz, what was going through your head?
I think my first thoughts were actually sympathy for Madrid because of how much it had rained that day. Like we were out and about exploring Madrid, and my shoes were drenched, my socks were drenched, and it was so rainy. And talking to locals, they were saying this has been the rainiest March we've had in years and years. A quick Google search, there was one headline that said, "Why is it not going to stopping raining in Spain?" Right, and that's unprecedented. And that can happen. And if we had conditions like that, even at the Emirates, it would have made for a more difficult pitch. If that was at Arsenal's second ground at Meadow Park, we saw when we played Bayern Munich in the final group stage game, that was a really difficult pitch as well. I think the irony almost is you look at the one club who hasn't played at the Bernabeu, the other club who's trying to do everything to push their women's team in the right direction, put them on the greater stage. But the one who are doing that are the one who lost the game. So actually, these conditions, as much as it's frustrating for you guys, and I really feel for you as Real Madrid fans, if that's perhaps on a carpet at the Bernabeu with the roof on, and Arsenal are able to play their football more effectively, then maybe you actually get a bit of a different outcome from the ties. So as much as it's frustrating for you, it has worked into Real Madrid's advantage ultimately because they adapted to the conditions really well. Their style was suited to it, and they had those X factor players that Arsenal didn't. Linda Caicedo, for example, with that pacing behind, Arsenal don't have a player like that, and there've been too many occurrences recently when Arsenal have just looked a little bit too one-dimensional. And I think, and the word I used to describe Madrid was street smart as well. And Arsenal didn't have that. That being able to be in the moment, realize, you've got a lot of experience on that team. You should be able to realize actually playing through the thirds isn't going to be the best idea. Let's look to get it into the penalty area. The biggest frustration for me was the lack of shooting from distance, the lack of testing Misa in goal for Real Madrid, because that is, even for the best goalkeepers, when the ball's coming at you and it's soaking wet, your goalie gloves are wet and muddy, and the ball's dropping down for rebounds for someone like Russo to follow in. There was just a lack of shooting on site, and obviously Real did that with Athenea's second goal. So look, frustrating, and obviously with the Bernabeu being free, From an English perspective, our argument can be quite easy, but I think there also has to be understanding of why Real are playing here, and also taking into account that the weather was horrendous. If we turned up on a sunny day and the pitch looked like that, then that's a different conversation. But these things can happen, and at the end of the day, the referee said the pitch is playable and that they can get out there. So the good thing is that nobody's been seriously injured, because that was my worry. Certainly by half time, I think Senior Brun slipped over quite badly, and at that point it looked worrying. But luckily, I think everyone's come through okay.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone would have gotten seriously injured, that would have been even a bigger point of criticism. That putting players' health at risk by playing on a pitch like that. And my thoughts on this is I accept the criticism. It's fair to say that a big fixture like this against a big club like this should be celebrated on a bigger platform or on a bigger stadium with all the fans in. I do get that. uh I'm not going to defend the club in saying that okay, this is the best, or we are doing our best or whatever. My criticism has always been with the club not marketing the women's side enough, and that still stands. uh I feel like the club, a lot of the times it feels like the women's side has been an afterthought for Real Madrid. And as much as I'm a Madridista, I used to wish for my club to have a women's team for years. Then they got in when the women's football curve was on the rise and everybody was getting into it, and they got into it, and I was happy about it. But then with if you've been following Madrid, about the managerial struggles, about the dressing room struggles a little bit. You would realize how bad the management has been in terms of finding the right option, finding the right player people to lead the team. It hasn't done a good job, despite everything that has happened on the pitch, despite those embarrassing results against Barcelona that catches everyone's eyes. But to the regular watchers, this is the reality. We know of it. We know how difficult it has been, despite the manager putting out shambolic performances. We haven't had those changes. So all in all, this all comes down to the club not taking the women's team as seriously. And as disappointing as that sounds, I think that is the reality. If it was in my hand, I would have definitely had this picture in the Bernabeu. But I mean, if it's not in my hand, unfortunately. uh but yeah, I mean, let's get that elephant out of the room now, because that has been the major talking point across every media house that I came across today morning. Let's talk about something that you mentioned as well. Arsenal lacking that sort of talismanic figure in the lineup, somebody who can make a difference on their own. Do you think Arsenal got it wrong in terms of the lineup? For the listeners, for the viewers, I'll quickly go through Arsenal's and Real Madrid's lineup as well. So Arsenal were in a 4-2-3-1 with Zinsberger starting in goal, Emily Fox, Leah Williamson, Catley, and Katie McCabe starting in defense, with a double pivot of Kyra Cooney-Cross and Kim Little, and a front four of Beth Mead, Alessia Russo, Caldente, and Plaxtenius leading the line. In contrast, Madrid were in a different shape. This rotation is very much expected from Madrid's point of view, but Madrid started with three midfielders, sort of forming a line of four at times, having four midfielders with Caroline Weir also dropping and forming that diamond. So it was Misa in goal, Sheila starting as the right back, Maria Mendes and Lacrar as the centre back, and Olga obviously as the left back, with another line of four of Angeldal, Toletti, Leupolz, and Linda Caicedo, and the front two of Caroline Weir and Senior Brun. So, you have these four midfielders in Madrid's lineup compared to just two basically for Arsenal. Do you think, and given how Madrid have set up in the past against Chelsea as well in these big games, starting with four midfielders has been sort of their thing. Do you think Arsenal got it wrong? Renée Slegers got it wrong about the way they set up?
I think for me, the number 10 role for Arsenal is really interesting because I think in Mariona and Frida Maanum, you've got two players who are really, really effective in that role. Mariona obviously is a player you'll have seen a lot of, not for good reasons sometimes, I'm sure, some of her performances, but obviously Renée Slegers wants Alessia Russo on the pitch at all times. We've seen when Arsenal had wingers out injured that in some of these games when late on in the game she'd bring on Blackstenius and then she'd move Russo out wide. I think what my criticism would be is that Alessia Russo is not Arsenal's best number 10, and I get wanting to have her on the pitch, but she's not as effective in that position as a Mariona or even a Frida Maanum. I think Stina starting up front made sense on that pitch when you're looking to get the ball in behind. She's a better player at running onto the ball than Alessia Russo. Russo, though, far better the finisher, certainly this season, and she just hasn't. I don't think she scored any goals really from the number 10 role at all, and she doesn't provide what Mariona does. I thought Arsenal actually did okay in midfield for large parts of the game, but Real with those four in midfield, it just meant that the second that first goal went in, that the game just then suited them better and better and better. And I thought, if anything, a 1-0 defeat is probably okay for Arsenal, and I feel quite confident going into the Emirates, but then to sort of lose your shape and then concede that second goal late on, I think that could be really, really pivotal, because I think the feeling amongst Arsenal fans and some of the Spanish journalists I spoke to yesterday is that they do think Real will score at the Emirates. So that means Arsenal need to be far more proficient in front of goal. It will be interesting to see if Madrid go with a similar shape. Obviously, you guys have got Barcelona this weekend, so that throws, something in terms of how you select. Do you, play a bit of a second string for that game, I'd imagine. Arsenal have got Liverpool, who only beat us the other week in the FA Cup, so sort of a less than ideal weekend for either side between the games. But I think Arsenal did get that selection wrong, and when you bring on two wingers at half time, two direct, quick wingers, it's basically admitting that you were 45 minutes too late in terms of realising the best way of attacking the home side. So yeah, really interesting to see how things change next week.
And you mentioned Maanum there, and I feel like she could have been Arsenal's solution here, because earlier on you also mentioned the fact that you were pretty frustrated about Arsenal not trying their luck from distance, and I agree, because I think they had just one or two shots from outside the box, and I was like, you don't need, because once we got ahead, the game state favored us, and we were okay with sitting back and sitting deep and looking for the transition opportunities. And in those situations with 8-9 players behind the ball, it's very difficult to get through. No matter what team it is, it's very difficult to get through and score those quote unquote cute goals from inside the box. But if you had somebody like Maanum, who is known for her long range striking, and in situations like this, in conditions like this, it would have actually helped Arsenal a lot. Plus, it would have provided an extra player in midfield better than what Russo was able to do at the number 10.
Yeah, completely agree with that. I think the general consensus of the fans is that Mariona's not quite as effective on the wing. I think even she's played in the double pivot at times when we've had injuries in midfield, but definitely Maanum, I think she works well, sort of dropping into midfield, driving the ball forward. She's very tidy on the ball, which I think again is a helpful quality to have last night. And Arsenal just seem their build up in midfield is not the same through Alessia Russo. She doesn't seem to get a lot of the ball, and a game like last night is just going to bypass her, and you're almost better off going to a flat midfield four and then having Russo up top alongside Blackstenius. I think the one moment where I really thought Arsenal needed to shoot was when Leupolz found a bit of space from 25 yards, and it really opened up for her nicely. And instead she played through Chloe Kelly, and straight away there were 2 or 3 Madrid defenders on her. So yeah, the midfield was interesting. Valti came on in the second half, but it was all about Arsenal trying to get the ball out wide, trying to sort of beat the offside trap, and it just didn't quite work out. I think even with the changes that were made, the style of football stayed relatively similar, and they just weren't able to create really anything in the second half, which was disappointing.
And I think you mentioning the fact that Arsenal were limited through the middle and were forced out wide, I think part of that was Madrid's plan as well, because earlier on, before we went ahead, Madrid were committing heavily, like a lot of players up front when Arsenal were trying to build up, and the striking factor for that was we were completely trying to block any access to your double pivot, which I think shows in the numbers as well. I think Little throughout the game just got 40 touches. Kyra Cooney Cross had some 35, 30 odd touches. And being playing as the deepest midfielder, you would expect that to be more. You would expect her to be more involved. But I think Madrid there did a good job of sort of blocking that easy access to the double pivot initially, and that forced you guys wide consistently. And once it went wide, it was helpful for Madrid to sort of block that out and suck the possession out near the touchline. So I feel that thing was something that Madrid did really well throughout the game. But let's talk about the goals, because I think first one was obviously down to the pitch, and Kanita, I'll get it to you on this one. The second goal that Athenea scored after coming on, we had been threatening Arsenal throughout the game with those sort of situations, a player picking up the ball and running at their defenses. And if you look at that goal as well, Athenea is running with the ball, and then Arsenal's defense just keeps retreating, trying to anticipate a ball coming for Linda Caicedo there, but it never comes, and Athenea just cuts in and scores. And we'll talk about a little bit about the goalkeeper situation as well there. But Kanita, what did you make of that goal, the second goal?
Yeah, so like first of all, I think both goals are like came because of Toletti, like it's in the her directing the play and how like I mean the first goal was interceptions by her, but the second one yeah, so I think the way we started that we started with like the four midfielders is kind of makes more sense because we've been putting this like four midfielders lineup a lot in the big games with Angel Dal out wide, right? And I think that it would have been a bit odd if we had started with Athenea and Linda, because we do talk about them switching a lot. Maybe I don't know how it would have played out against Arsenal, but I think this is much played out tactic like with the four midfielders in big games like this season. So I think in the second goal what you said, the the ball never came to Linda, but Atenea got a hold on it and was it was well yeah it was weird, but it was from with like a small like with Irune and Toletti in the like back, and they're getting the ball out from Arsenal's midfield. They were helping the ball literally escape from their midfield and getting it to Weir, which opened up the whole play, and Weir passed it, saw Athenea there, and I know I've talked to some Madrid fans that were on the stadium, and they said like when they saw Athenea with that ball, they're like, "Oh my God, is this happening? Is this happening?" And they were all like, "Oh my God!" And then how she finished it, they were like, "Oh my God, we scored the second goal against Arsenal with Athenea, and Athenea scoring in a big game, And it was crazy. I mean, the goal also came after like a series of Arsenal trying to get that equalizer in the second half. And it was really smelling like that equalizer was coming. I was like, we need to score the second goal. I'm sorry, Freddie. you know and yeah, I just another counterattack. I don't know if I've ever seen this effective of counterattacks, like 2 out of 2, and starting from Toletti in this, and I'm not surprised, like she knows how to open up the play. So yeah, just crazy goal. But
And the second goal came from a transition, and this is something that watching recent games for Arsenal, and even in the past, it's something that Arsenal have seemed to struggle with. And it always looked like both the goals came against the run of play. Arsenal were dominating initially as well, and then we scored with that mistake from Leah Williamson. And the second goal as well, Arsenal looked like they'll now find the equalizer, and that came in as a hammer blow. Uh, do you think that this issue of defending set pieces, because we saw this against Liverpool as well, do you think it's a very real thing, and Arsenal do tend to struggle in defending transitions under Renée?
Yeah, and even going back to Jonas, I think that was one of Jonas's big problems at the end of his tenure. And I watched his first game for San Diego Wave, and they had the exact same issues.
Oh
You know,
my
they were getting
God.
pulled apart on the counter attack as well. So, Renée has changed some things, but at the end of the day, as Jonas's former assistant coach, there is going to be a lot that is similar and a lot that is going to take time to get out of the system. And that's why I think next season is going to be particularly interesting. And we're going to learn a bit more about Renée when she maybe gets some of her players in come the summer and coming on to next year. But I think it's a bit of a lack of pace in the defence, but it's also experienced players who shouldn't be making these errors. Fox and Williamson dropping back to allow Athenea to come forward. But also you've got to give credit to Real, because in the space for the second goal, they've got a couple of other players up front who are driving at the defence, and that's why Fox and Williamson get pulled backwards. You wouldn't see that as often, the team lower down the WSL when they come to Arsenal, with a 5-4-1, and often they leave their strikers so isolated that when they do actually break, and we've had quite a few games against teams, even in the Championship lower down the WSL, where there have been turnovers, and I thought a better team are going to punish us here. And because maybe they've only left one or two players up front, it's not quite been as effective. But now we're seeing teams maybe waking up to a bit, to this a bit more. West Ham had Shakira Martinez, and they pushed Viviana Say forward. Liverpool had Sophie Roman Hogg's physicality, but then also Olivia Smith, who we'll be seeing again on Saturday evening. And I think we always knew of Linda Caicedo what she was going to bring, but then also having Senior Brun up there. And, I think Real having what they had to bring off the bench as well, was a real sign of actually Arsenal are in a real game here with the players they were able to bring on, and their subs making more of an impact than Arsenal's. And yeah, it's hard because there's not a lot of time between games at the moment, and finding out what the issue is here, because Arsenal, Williamson and Catley have been very reliable under Renée Slegers, but they're not going to get any faster, but these mistakes have got to stop, because that should be a coach sitting down with those two, today or tomorrow, and saying, look, this is the wrong action in that situation. And then you can look at the goalkeeping too, of course, but on a pitch like that, goals are always going to come from mistakes and brilliance, and that's what it was.
And taking a 2-goal lead into the second leg is obviously a great thing for Madrid, and for large parts the team came away unscathed from that horrible pitch. We just had an injury to Melanie Leupolz, of which we have an update. I think, Kanita, would you like to share that? Fortunately, touch wood, it's not ACL, and but it's the same injury, I think, that she had in Jan. Kanita, what's the update on her?
Yes, I have it written down here. A very specific diagnosis. I mean, yeah, it's the same injury basically, but it's partial tear of the internal lateral ligament of the right knee. So yeah, it's the right knee again. It's again partial tear, everything like. So she was out for 2 months, so from like January to up till, I don't know, like 3 games ago, right? So it was like 2 months, and now, yeah, it's probably gonna be another 2 months, or maybe until the end of the season. So, yeah, it was non-contact. I mean, it looked very bad when she just
Yeah.
struck the ball there, and she cried, and I was like, oh, just not the dreaded three-letter injury. We just lost 2 players to knee injuries, one like ACL, Tere got the ACL and meniscus. So yeah, it's at least it's not ACL.
Yeah, honestly, like that was the biggest sigh of relief. We could not lose another midfielder because we don't have much depth, as much as we would like to paint it the other way. The next backup option is Irune, who is a 16-year-old at the moment, which is, although she can hold her ground, I think, and she did in this game as well. And I think she is going to see a lot more minutes moving forwards. But it's still like, you have to consider the fact that she's 16-year-old and you have to manage her workload more than the others. So yeah, fortunately nothing major with Leupolz, and hopefully she'll be back before the end of the season as well. But let's talk about, let's get back to the game. And this something that, with the recent struggles that Arsenal have had, 4-3 against West Ham, then being knocked out of the cup against Liverpool, and in general struggles that they have had trying to defend set pieces, trying to defend transition situations. Do you think there's a case of Renée being found out by teams now? And when, obviously there isn't a lot of changes that have happened um beyond like Jonas. This is basically Jonas's team. They do have the blueprint that Jonas followed, but with slight tweaks here and there. But do you think teams have started to figure it out now? Teams have started to figure out Renée more?
Yeah, I think there's a mental side as well because, when Renee came in, you obviously have your new manager bounce. She's quite a different character, I think, on the surface to Jonas, and players wanted to play for her. She took the pressure off the players by really refusing to say if she wanted the job, and it was just a case of putting her best team out one game at a time, not overthinking things, and she kept it really simple. And Arsenal had it, yes, on paper had a good run of fixtures during her interim tenure. I think probably the hardest one came right at the end of the year, obviously in that Bayern Munich game. And for many people, that was the game where they said, right, we've seen enough now. She's going to be our permanent manager. I just think Arsenal are limited with the squad they've got at the moment. I think the Chelsea game was a prime example when you just look down to the substitutes bench and the difference between the two sides is just too big. Obviously, you'd expect Arsenal squad-wise to be competing better, against a side like Real Madrid. You talk about the injuries there, and Arsenal are now in a position where actually the injury list is quite short. Daphne van Domselaar was a big loss. I think Lotte Wubben-Moy's been a big loss as well. I think her and Leah Williamson would be my preferred centre-back partner. But players who have been very consistent have just started to drop off, and these individual errors are coming in at the moment. I think you talk about Liverpool and West Ham, and is there just an expectation of some of these experienced players to just turn up and win these games? Perhaps the same yesterday as well, knowing it's two legs. Arsenal's sort of first leg record hasn't been great in the last few years. Their away record in Europe is really, really poor. As well, they lost at Häcken in the second round of qualifying back in September, I think it was, and even there was very sort of blasé about it, almost going, oh, it's half time in the tie, we'll be fine, we'll go back in front of our home fans. And I think now the worry is actually it's all right maybe doing that against Häcken, but when you do it against Real Madrid and when you concede so much ground in the first leg, this game now suits Real perfectly. We know the game state suited them with being able to drop deeper and hit Arsenal on the counter attack, and now they've got to do that for another 90 minutes. And you look at what's at stake for Real, what this means to them to get through and get to the semi-finals and hopefully prove a point to some of those, upstairs at the club as well. For Arsenal, they know probably that they won't win this competition. I know it's the same for Real, but there is always this almost foreboding with the Champions League that, well, however well you do, you're going to end up against a Barcelona or a Chelsea, or if Arsenal go through, probably a Lyon, who you would make strong favourites. I just think Renée's tactical flexibility is definitely being questioned, but I think with the players she's got at hand, I think it's quite clear that Arsenal need to bring the age profile down. They need that X factor player. There are sort of too many similar players and not enough match winners, but also not enough sort of serial trophy winners. I think that's what Mariona has really brought to the squad, the experience in these sort of competitions. But I said last week that how many of these Arsenal players are going to leave if the club don't win trophies? I don't think there are many who are going to be knocking on the door going, actually, if we don't win this and this season, I'm going to be looking to take that next step up in my career. I don't think there's enough of those players in this Arsenal side at the moment. Set piece wise, it is interesting because Arsenal changed their set piece coach in the summer. Patrick Vinquist, who worked with Jonas Eidevall, was replaced by Chris Bradley. I think at both ends of the pitch, it's probably not been a massive improvement. I think attacking set pieces were really, really poor at sort of the start of the season. I remember under Jonas, and they were having sort of no luck from them whatsoever. Again, maybe a lack of height in the team. Amanda Illistet's come back from her pregnancy, but it is not probably a player who will start these games for Arsenal. So I think it's all a little too samey. I think when you look across the pitch and when you do compare it to a team like Chelsea, who have that physical spine of Bright, Cuthbert, Ramirez, they have these areas covered. They have the squad depth to adapt to different game states. And Arsenal and teams coming up against Arsenal now, they know what they're coming up against. And it's going to be really interesting to see how, because Arsenal have played Liverpool recently, they've obviously played Real Madrid recently, and those are their next two opponents. So this is a massive test now of Renée Slegers. This is the first time she's taken charge of a two-legged game in her time in charge, and that does bring about a whole load of new challenges.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the squad not having a player with an X factor. I want to touch upon something that sparked a little bit of controversy post game about Rosa Kafaji. Her utilization in the squad has been, her integration has been poor. I mean, she is young, I get it, but her minutes have been really, really low. Like, she hasn't got any minutes at all, if you want to go ahead and say that as well. And given the sort of talent that she was, given the sort of caliber that she has and in the past as well, she has scored against Madrid with Haken. Across both the ties, she had scored against Madrid. She has a good long shot on her. She has a good feet on her. She can dribble through tight spaces and create those opportunities. Do you think yesterday would have been a good time to see some minutes for her? Because post game, what happened was the whole Instagram story thing that happened. It's not a good look, and I think if something like that happens, it has a domino effect as well in the background. So yeah, I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting point. I think I would have liked to see her come on because Lena Hurtig comes on, you know what you're going to get with her. You can go direct, get it into the penalty area. She is an aerial presence. But again, my criticism is that's not what Arsenal did. They didn't play into the hands of the players who were on the pitch, right? And if Rosa Kafaji comes on the way Arsenal are playing, actually plays more into her hands. She's a player who grew up playing cage football in Stockholm, that sort of pitch is probably going to suit her, taking on a few players like you say, Frida Marnham as well, going for goal from range. It's been interesting, and I think she's just probably a victim of the change of manager this season, because even you looked at Cooney Cross under Renée Slegers. Now, she was so good in her sort of cameos that Renée couldn't not start her. But Kafaji, any chance of her coming into the side, once you've had a bad start to the season, once you have a manager who wants to pick her best team game after game after game, go with the more experienced players, and also players who she can trust in possession. And that was a bit of an issue for Cooney Cross and Mariona, and Cooney Cross has certainly improved her defensive side of the game. But I watched Kafaji. The one start she's made, I think, this calendar year was away to Brighton in the League Cup, and it's just she wants to do everything on the ball. She wants to be everywhere. I'm not quite sure Arsenal know if she's best as a 10 or out wide. And we've talked already about sort of fitting a Mariona or a Marnham into the 10. So it'll be interesting to see the situation there, because I think she's probably a player who's too good to go out on loan. She is that X Factor player. Arsenal in the last few years haven't accommodated X Factor players particularly well. When you think of a player who maybe doesn't fit a certain position, Viviana Miedema is the prime example, right? There's different reasons as to her departure, but Arsenal were never able to find somewhere where they could get the best out of Miedema. It's been the same at Manchester City as well. It's not great from Kafaji. I think, look, whether she's meant that to go out on her private story potentially, it could be referring to anything. It could be really like that. It could be referring to anything, but that's an hour after a game in which she's not played, and I think the message is quite clear. And she's probably, if she's meant to put it on her private story, then that's why she's deleted it. Otherwise, she's maybe had someone tap her on the shoulder and go, I'm not sure this is a great idea. And probably this is where she needs a bit of advice from people around her to go, this is not the way to force yourself into the side. It is it is that element of taking your chances. She did do that when she came on against West Ham in Renée's second game in charge. She scored a really good goal, and it's going to be frustrating. But I think as a young player in the season that Arsenal have had, I get why it's painful, because there was a lot of excitement around the signing. As you say, she's got Champions League experience, but I just think Arsenal haven't had the chance in a lot of these games to really trust her, and I think a lot of that has been Renée coming in as the interim manager. But look, you know, we're playing in a WSL where all we've got is the Champions League to play for. I hope we do see a little bit more of Rosa Kafaji, because she is an exciting player, and you know, I think she's got every right to think that she should be playing plenty more than she has been. I just don't think that's the right way to necessarily go about it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like with players like this who are normally on the bench and don't see a lot of minutes, when they do come on the pitch, they want to do everything because they want to make the most of those minutes that they've got on the pitch. And in doing so, they sometimes try to overdo things. And I think Kafaji has been a victim of that as well. Whenever she has come on, she sometimes tries to overcomplicate things and tries to do everything on her own. Because she wants to make a mark. She wants to make her limited minutes on the pitch memorable so that she can start the next game maybe. And that does not play into what, you know, they expect it to. So yeah, I mean, it was just an interesting thing for me because yeah, it's a she's a big talent. She has a lot of potential to, you know, change games on her own. So yeah, it would have liked to see her, but totally get it. Now, Madrid have a 2-goal lead going into the next leg, going into the big game at the Emirates. What do you expect at the Emirates? Of course, you expect Arsenal to go out and win it. But beyond that, what changes do you think Renée would make? And how do you think the team can best set up in the second leg?
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting. I think you're going to, if I'm Renée, I'm putting Alessia Russo back up front, and I'm not moving her from that position for the rest of the season. She's been in such good form. She has been one of Arsenal's most consistent performers, and I don't think the addition of Stephen Blackstenius has paid off enough to justify dropping Russo into a deeper role, and it puts pressure on Blackstenius. Of course it does, but she's just not been prolific enough in front of goal. And when you've got another prolific player on the pitch but not in the best position, you know, it is a valid criticism. I'd like to see Chloe Kelly start probably with her pace. I think she's made a good impact wherever possible. There's not loads I would change. I think Daphne Van Domselaar coming back in it is a good boost. Arsenal will probably hope that they'll be able to nullify Real Madrid better on the counter attack, but you do think it'll be Arsenal who have to change more tactically than Real. But again, with the squad Arsenal have, it's not like there's a myriad of options where they can really look to, you know, to change formations, really change personnel, for example, and find a better effect. And this again is where they are quite predictable. As I said earlier, the concern for me is that I see Real scoring at some point, putting 3 goals past a team who, as you said, put in an unbelievable defensive performance yesterday, you know, to restrict Arsenal to as few shots, Misa making some important saves. So it's going to be fascinating. Real are in a really, really good position. For me, it's probably about 50-50. The home advantage makes a difference. You can maybe push it 60-40 in Arsenal's favour. But, you know, if Real get a first half goal, for example, then it's going to be a really, really big task for Arsenal. Probably Renée Slegers' biggest task yet.
Yeah, I mean, and we would be hoping that we get that first half goal.
Of course.
But yeah, I think from our perspective, I don't think there will be much change. Yes, we have got Barcelona at the weekend, but I think that will be treated as a secondary game, because having a 2-goal lead in a Champions League quarterfinal tie is important, is big for the club as well to make it to the semifinals. It will be a big statement for everyone in the higher ups as well. So yeah, I think the importance will definitely shift towards the Champions League second leg. I think the only change, and this will be a forced one, will be that Leupolz is out. So I'm expecting either Erune to come in. If not, then we'll probably make a change, and Angel Dol and Toletti will start in midfield along with Caroline Weir in the 10 role, and we'll start either Naomi Feller or Athenea. I think this is the more likelier one than starting a 16-year-old at such a big stadium. I think those are the only changes that we are going to make, and one of them is also forced. So that is what I expect. And yes, I do think that Madrid can score against Arsenal. I don't think Arsenal has the strongest of defenses, and with Linda Caicedo, with Brune there, and with the pitch not looking half as bad as it did it did in Madrid, I think there will be a lot more opportunities, and we'll be able to exploit it much better as well. So I think it will be an even game. I do think that we have a goal in us at the Emirates, and yeah, that's going to make things interesting. Kanita, what are your opinions on the second leg?
I actually don't agree that the lineup is predictable. Um, because of Toril and because I don't think knowing Toril that well, first of all, we might put up a horrendous game against Barcelona once again. But I don't think we'll treat it as a second grade game. So I don't know. We might see against Arsenal again, like yes, maybe an Olga start or whatever. Anything is possible for me. Like I know Toril enough this season. Like his unpredictability has almost become predictable for me. This is not a skill I wanted to acquire, but I did. So I don't know. I don't agree with the sentiment that it might only be like one or two changes. It's very unlikely actually. But yeah, honestly, I do hope we get first half goal. But if we do get to the semifinals, I will probably wake up to the Toril 2030 news. There's
Yeah.
always something bad in something very good. So I don't know. I already expected Toril 2030 after this game. I'm so glad we haven't gotten it yet. So yeah.
It's a double-edged sword winning these sort of important ties as a Madrid fan at this point. But yeah, I think let's see. I hope it's a great game, honestly, and may the best team win. And I hope the best team is Madrid.
Just quickly, if it goes to extra time, how do you see that panning out from a Madrid point of view in terms of the players that both teams can bring off the bench and who would be better sort of withstanding that? Say Arsenal win 2-0, 3-1, for example, extra time and penalties.
I think in terms of attacking options, we do have a little bit there because we have got Alba Redondo, we have got Naomi Feller on the bench, we have got Eva Navarro as well on the bench. So I think if it goes to added extra time, we do have a couple of options to chase the game and score that goal in the final 30 minutes. I think we have enough potential for that. Uh, my only worry is if we go full strength against Barcelona, that will be putting a lot of pressure on these players, the same set of players, because this what we put out against Arsenal is probably our best lineup, and if we are going to go with that against Barcelona as well, and then once again in the return leg against Arsenal, it's going to put a lot of pressure on these players and the workload that they have. So my only worry would be in that case that if it goes to added extra time, then we are not in a great position because these players would have had a lot of minutes in their tanks already. But yeah, I think off the bench we do have options. Penalties, I don't want to watch another set of penalties after watching the men's side do what they did in the round of 16. I don't want any penalties. Let's decide it in normal time. That would be the best. But
Yeah.
yeah, if it goes to that, I think we do have attacking options. We do have enough to sort of cause problems to Arsenal. And we have players who will be good in transition, who will be very good against tired legs. Because Evan Navarro is great at running at defenses. Naomi Feller is great at running at defenses, and Alba Redondo is the same. So we have got three very quick players who can come on later in the second half and cause problems against Arsenal, who will also have tired legs on the pitch. So if it goes to that, I think we have enough. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll just be brief. I just want Toril to not sub out our entire attack in minute 70. And and I don't want us to go to penalties. I have traumas with this team.
Yeah.
Freddie, we have traumas from the cup final from 2 years ago. So we're not very happy about that, and getting our entire attack subbed off at like 70th minute, and then I don't know, not getting any attackers out in the extra time. I just hope that it doesn't come to extra time. I don't, whoever wins, I just want it to be over in 90 minutes. This would, if we come to the extra time, that this would also be the first time ever we would go to extra time in a two-legged tie. So, it's very unlikely. But I just wanted to end 90 minutes. I cannot take this anymore.
Just to give you context, we lost the Copa de la Reina Cup final after being 2-0 up till 88 minute.
88th minute, yeah.
It went to penalties. That could have been our first trophy, and we lost on penalties after being leading by 2 goals till the 88th minute. So if it goes to 88th minute and the aggregate score is still 2-0, I wouldn't be confident. The PTSD will kick in.
Exactly.
Yeah, we had I think our last penalty shootout was when we lost to Paris FC in the qualifier 2 seasons ago, and obviously that left a real sort of shadow over the rest of that season. And that would have gone to extra time, but the extra time I'll always remember is Wolfsburg, that sold out semi-final, and how the emotions of that game. And again, Real playing on Sunday, but Arsenal playing on Saturday, that extra day's rest as well, that could be a boost potentially for us too. So a lot in play. It's just going to be really interesting. I am looking forward to it somehow, being back at the Emirates. And and at least if Arsenal do lose, I've got you've got you guys, I've got Hridium, some of the local journalists who covered Real lovely last night. I'm not going to be. No, there's worse teams to lose to. Let's put it that way. You're not a Tottenham or a Man United, at least.
Yeah, for that to happen, United would probably have to make the Champions League first.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. But yeah, not running the risk of United fans getting at me. But yeah, let's wrap this up. It's been a pleasure, Freddie. Thank you for agreeing to coming on. It's been really insightful, the things that you have shared about the team, about Renée, about where it went wrong, and the squad in general as well. So thanks a lot for that. And for everyone listening, for everyone watching this as well, I'll hand you the stage. You can share where we can find you, where if we want to connect to you, if we want to read what you write, where can we do that?
Well, no, thank you both. I'm a big fan of both of your work, Yash. I've read your stuff for a long time, so it's lovely to chat to both of you. Obviously, wish it was after an Arsenal win, but it's been really good to get that insight, certainly into the pitch and some of the the backdrop of this game. I'm at cardyfreddie on Twitter and Bluesky, and I write for the Gooner Fanzine, which for this season and last season we've been putting together the sort of first magazines dedicated to Arsenal women before the Spurs game last month. It was our first ever print fanzine, which went out 48 pages, and that's available around the world as well. There was one, Nagore, who writes for Relevo in Spain. She actually bought one off me yesterday. She wrote for our first edition, and we're hoping to have her on board for our next one, which should be out next month. So yeah, really exciting times for that. And yeah, I'll be at the Emirates on Saturday, and then next Wednesday as well.
So yeah, we'll share all of Freddie's handle in the description and the article that accompanies this podcast. So yeah, you can find him. You can talk to him. He, as you would have figured out, he's a great person altogether. And yeah, hopefully the next time we talk, we are into the semifinals. We'll see
Like I
about
said,
that.
there's worse teams to lose to. There's definitely. I can't say I'm developing a soft spot for Real Madrid, but you know, I think what you guys have gone through as fans, when I compare that to how Arsenal have, you know, being at the forefront of seeing how Arsenal have done things, I think what it would mean for Real to, you know, to reach a semi-final would be quite something. But obviously, I'm hoping Arsenal turn it around. But I think it's going to be a tough watch. I think for all of us on Wednesday, it's going to be it's going to be a long sort of emotional night.
Totally agreed. I'm not looking forward to it, but I
Me
just
neither.
hope the result is in our favor. But yeah, let's wrap this up. That is about it, guys. Thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting us throughout. We will see you next time with probably a therapy pod because it's Barcelona once again. And that is what Barcelona makes us do. But yeah, so until next time, Hala Madrid.
Ala Madrid.